The Giant Cowboy and the Preacher's Daughter, a forbidden Western love story. They called him the Giant Cowboy. Some said he once lifted a full-grown bull just to stop it from charging a child. Others whispered that he could break a horse's back with one swing of his arm. But those who truly knew him, if anyone ever really did, said he was a quiet man, a man who'd seen too much of life's dust and blood to talk about it. His name was Eli Cutter, and by the time this story begins, he was a stranger riding into the small town of Dry Creek, looking for work, or maybe something else entirely. The sun was dipping low, spilling gold across the wooden rooftops when Eli rode in. His hat brim shadowed half his face, his shirt dusty from the long ride, his eyes, those gray, tired eyes, searching for something he couldn't quite name. He tied his horse outside the Silver Spur Saloon, stepped down, and for a moment, just listened. The hum of laughter inside, the faint creak of a rocking chair, a woman's voice singing a hymn somewhere down the street. That last sound made him stop. It wasn't the hymn itself, but the voice, soft, trembling, like sunlight on glass. He followed it without thinking, past the saloon and toward the small white church at the edge of town. The door was open, and there she was, a girl in a simple blue dress, sweeping the floor, singing as if the whole world wasn't watching her. Her name, he'd later learn, was Mary Collins, the preacher's daughter. She turned when she noticed him standing there. For a moment, they both froze, two strangers caught in a silence that felt like something sacred. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice polite but cautious. Eli took off his hat. "Didn't mean to interrupt, ma'am. Just hadn't heard a voice like that in a long while." A faint blush crossed her face. "It's just an old hymn. My father says music keeps the heart clean." "Your father sounds like a good man," Eli said, his tone unreadable. She smiled softly. "He is. He doesn't take kindly to strangers, though. Especially ones who walk into his church uninvited." There was a teasing spark in her eyes, and for a moment, Eli forgot how to breathe. He just nodded, awkward, like a man who'd forgotten how to talk to decent folks. "I'll be on my way, then," he said, tipping his hat again. But as he turned to leave, she said, "Wait." He stopped. "There's a rodeo tomorrow," she said, her fingers tightening around the broom handle. "If you're new in town, maybe you could stop by. Folks around here don't often see new faces." He smiled, a rare, crooked smile. "Maybe I will." That night, Eli lay awake under the stars outside town, listening to the coyotes and thinking about the preacher's daughter with the soft voice and steady eyes. He'd come here to disappear, not to be noticed, especially not by someone like her. Because everyone in Dry Creek knew Reverend Collins ruled his house with the same fire he used in his sermons. He preached about sin, about temptation, and about keeping away from men who carried guns and secrets. And Eli, well, he carried both. The next morning, the rodeo grounds were alive with dust and cheers. Men shouted bets, women waved handkerchiefs, and children ran barefoot between wagons. Eli stood near the fence, watching the broncos buck and twist, until someone shouted, "Hey, stranger. You ride?" Eli didn't answer, just adjusted his hat and stepped over the fence. The crowd quieted as he mounted the wild horse, a beast named Diablo that no one had dared to ride that day. The gates swung open. The world turned into chaos, the horse kicking, spinning, rage burning in its eyes. But Eli didn't move, didn't flinch. He rode like he'd been born in the saddle, one with the animal beneath him. The crowd roared, and when the dust finally settled, he was still sitting tall, calm as stone. That's when he saw her again, Mary, standing near the fence, clapping, her eyes wide with awe. But beside her stood a tall, stern man with a black coat and Bible in hand, Reverend Collins. The preacher's eyes met Eli's, and in that single glance, Eli felt a warning colder than the desert night. When the preacher turned to lead his daughter away, Mary looked back over her shoulder, just once, and smiled faintly. It was enough to set something dangerous stirring inside him. That night, Eli sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames. He told himself to forget her. She was trouble, innocent trouble, the kind that destroys men like him. But in the silence of the night, he kept hearing her voice, her laugh, that soft, wait, in the church doorway. And deep down, he knew something had begun, something neither of them could stop. Because in a town full of dust, guns, and God, love was the most forbidden thing of all. And when love shows up where it's not supposed to, somebody always gets burned. That night, Dry Creek was quieter than usual. The saloon had gone dark early, the street lamps burned low, and even the crickets seemed to hush, as if the whole town knew something was stirring beneath the calm. Eli Cutter sat by the dying fire outside town, his hat pulled low and his hands resting on his knees. He'd been staring at the flames for hours, thinking about her, the preacher's daughter with the hymn-sweet voice and the smile that cut through his silence like sunlight through a canyon. He told himself to forget her. That was the smart thing to do. She was a preacher's girl, pure, protected, and meant for a life that didn't cross paths with men like him. But the problem was, Eli had never been a smart man when it came to his heart. By dawn, he was already saddled up and riding back toward town. He told himself it was just to find work, maybe at the stables or the general store. But deep down, he knew he was lying to himself. When he reached the churchyard, he found Mary hanging white linens on a line behind the chapel. The morning sun painted her hair in gold, and for a moment, he just watched, quiet, almost reverent. She looked up, startled, then smiled. "You came back. Didn't plan on it," he said, swinging down from his horse. "Guess my horse missed the sound of your singing." She laughed, a soft, real laugh that felt like it hadn't been heard enough in that dusty town. "You sure it's your horse that missed it?" Eli grinned, "A small one. Maybe both of us." They talked a while. About the town, about her father's sermons, about the way the nights here felt colder than most. She told him she'd never been outside Dry Creek, never even seen the ocean, though she'd dreamed of it since she was little. "I heard it's endless," she said, her eyes on the sky. "Like standing at the edge of God's own mirror." Eli nodded slowly. "It is. And it's lonely, too. You start to think maybe you're not supposed to see that much of forever." She looked at him, puzzled. "You've been there, once," he said, "a long time ago." There was something in his tone, a shadow, that made her curious. "You've seen so much of the world, Eli. Why come to a small town like this?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Because I needed a place where nobody knows my name." She studied him, the way one studies a book with pages missing. "You've done bad things." He smiled faintly. "Haven't we all?" She didn't press, but something in his answer lingered in her heart like a whisper. The rest of the day passed slow, with the sun burning hot over the plains. When evening came, Eli found himself sitting by the church steps again, waiting. And when Mary stepped outside with a lantern in hand, she didn't look surprised to see him. "My father's at the Collins farm tonight," she said softly. "He won't be back till morning." Eli's pulse quickened. "You shouldn't be telling me that." "Maybe I shouldn't," she said. "But you don't look like a man who means harm." He looked away. "That's the thing, Mary. Folks don't always look like what they are." She stepped closer, the lantern light flickering between them. "Then tell me what you are, Eli." He swallowed hard. "Just a man who's done enough wrong to know better than this." For a long moment, neither spoke. The night was thick with silence, the kind that holds too much truth. Then she reached out and touched his hand, light as a feather. "Maybe you came here to do something right for once," she whispered. Her touch burned through him, not with passion, but with a kind of peace he hadn't felt in years. But before he could say another word, a sharp voice cut through the dark. "Mary." The sound of boots on gravel. The preacher stood at the gate, lantern high, eyes blazing like fire. Eli stepped back instantly, guilt flashing across his face. Mary froze, her hand still trembling where it had touched his. "Get inside," Reverend Collins barked. "Father, I was just..." "I said inside." Eli stood silent, hat in hand. The preacher turned to him. "I know you're kind. I've seen you in every town. Men who come with dust on their boots and sin in their hearts. You stay away from my daughter. You hear me?" Eli's voice was calm, but steady. "Wasn't planning on hurting anyone, Reverend." "Then leave. Before you do." Eli gave a small nod. "If that's what it takes." He turned, mounted his horse, and rode off into the dark, the sound of his hooves fading into the distance. Inside the house, Mary stood by the window, tears in her eyes as she watched his shadow disappear. Her father's warning echoed through the walls, but something deeper stirred in her chest, something that no sermon could silence. Because she'd seen something in that man's eyes, sorrow, maybe, or redemption waiting to happen. And no matter what her father said, she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something she didn't yet understand. That night, as thunder rolled far over the desert hills, Mary whispered a prayer, not for forgiveness, but for courage. Because love, in a town like Dry Creek, was the most dangerous prayer of all. The next few days in Dry Creek carried a strange kind of silence, the kind that hangs heavy before a storm. Folks went about their business as usual, but whispers followed Eli Cutter's name wherever he went. Some said he was a gunfighter hiding from the law. Others swore he'd killed a man down in Texas. And Reverend Collins made sure everyone knew one thing for certain: his daughter was never to speak to him again. But hearts don't always listen to sermons. Mary tried. She prayed. She stayed busy with church work and chores, but every night when the wind blew through the cracks in her window, she heard his voice, calm, low, gentle. She could still see his eyes, tired but kind. And Eli, though he rode miles away from town, couldn't shake her from his mind. He'd tried to convince himself it was just a moment of weakness, the way loneliness makes fools of good men. But he knew better. He'd known love before, once, and it had ended in blood. Years ago, back when he was still a deputy in Abilene, Eli had fallen for a rancher's wife. She'd been trapped in a cruel marriage, and he'd tried to protect her. The husband found out. Guns were drawn, and when the smoke cleared, Eli was left standing over the man's body. He'd never fired another gun after that day. That was the story he'd been running from. The sin that made him leave everything behind. But now, looking at the hills where Dry Creek slept under the setting sun, he felt the same pull again, the pull of something he knew he shouldn't want. Love had ruined him once. Would it again? He didn't have to wonder long. That night, a boy from town came riding out to his camp, breathless. "Mr. Cutter," he gasped, "you gotta come quick. There's trouble in Dry Creek. Bandits hit the church. They got the preacher's daughter." Eli didn't think. He didn't speak. He just mounted his horse and tore through the desert like lightning. By the time he reached town, smoke was rising from the churchyard. Two men with scarves over their faces were dragging Mary toward their horses. Reverend Collins lay on the steps, bleeding but alive. "Let her go," Eli roared, voice echoing across the street. The men turned, guns flashing in the firelight. Eli dove from his saddle just as the first bullet whizzed past his ear. He hit the ground, rolled, and in one motion drew the revolver he swore he'd never touch again. 2 shots, clean, sharp, final. Both men fell. The silence afterward was deafening. Mary rushed to him, tears streaming down her face. "You came back," she whispered. He holstered the gun slowly. Didn't have much of a choice. Behind them, Reverend Collins groaned. Eli ran to him, kneeling beside him. The preacher's blood was dark on the dirt, his breathing ragged. "Stay still, Reverend. Help's coming." Collins opened his eyes, weak but fierce. You saved her." Eli nodded. "Did what any man would." The preacher's hand clutched his arm. "Not any man," he rasped. "I judged you without knowing your heart." Eli looked away. "You were right too. I've done things I can't pray away." Collins shook his head. "Then maybe God sent you here to make something right." For a long moment, Eli said nothing. Then the preacher's eyes closed, his chest rising and falling slow, shallow, still. Mary fell to her knees beside her father, sobbing quietly. Eli laid a hand on her shoulder. "He was a good man," he said softly. Through tears, she whispered, "So are you, Eli. You just forgot it for a while." He stood then, looking out at the town, the burning church, the faces appearing in the flickering light, the weight of what he'd done settling deep in his chest. By dawn, Reverend Collins was buried behind the church he'd built. The town gathered, and though no one said it out loud, every soul there knew Eli Cutter had saved them all. After the funeral, Mary found him by his horse, saddled and ready to leave. "You're not staying," she said quietly. He shook his head. "Dry Creek needs peace, Mary. A man like me doesn't bring that." Tears welled in her eyes. "Where will you go?" He smiled faintly. "Wherever the road runs out." She stepped closer. You don't have to keep running. Not anymore. He took her hand, rough palm against her soft fingers. You don't know what it's like to carry ghosts, sweetheart. I don't need to, she said. Because I believe in what I see. And I see a man who finally stopped running when he found something worth standing for. He looked at her for a long time, the sunrise painting her face in gold, the same gold he'd seen the first day he met her. And in that quiet morning, Eli Cutter, the giant cowboy, the man with a gun and a broken heart, leaned down and kissed the preacher's daughter. Not a kiss of promise, but of peace. When he pulled away, he whispered, "You keep that light, Mary. Don't let this world take it." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "And you don't forget who you are." He tipped his hat one last time, mounted his horse, and rode west, into the rising sun, where the land stretched endless and empty. Mary stood, watching until he was nothing but a silhouette against the light. Some said he disappeared into the desert, others claimed he joined a ranch near the border. But in Dry Creek, they still tell the story of the giant cowboy, the outlaw who saved a town and loved a preacher's daughter. And when the wind blows through the churchyard at night, it carries a whisper, soft, steady, full of memory. Some love ain't meant to last forever, but sometimes, that's what makes it holy. Thank you so much for watching this story till the very end. Your support means more than words can ever say. If you felt the depth of this journey, don't forget to give it a like, share it with someone who needs it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Together, we'll keep bringing powerful stories to life, and your presence here makes all the difference.